plates. We usually do it at the end. I am here to introduce to you the moderator and the panel, who she will introduce the panel to you. I do hope you're having an okay time, and I hope that you're looking forward to delving into the meat of the matter about how we really best develop the teacher profession so that our students have better outcomes. To take you on this journey, I'm going to leave you with, in the good hands of CNN Editor-at-Large, Kelly Wallace. Kelly has so many accolades, I'm not even going to pretend to try and say them, but what I will tell you is that I think she's a rock star. And I think she's a rock star not just because she gets it, but because she's the one person I know who can take all the jargon and all what you hear and put it into plain language so that people like me can actually stand here and pretend I know what I'm talking about. So Kelly, why don't you introduce the panel, please?
I also have to lower the mic significantly. Height envy, I have it. I'm just thrilled to be here. Some of you might know I was here last year, and I was so inspired and secretly hoped they would invite me back, and they do. Because I'm so inspired by this conversation, and I really relish any opportunity to talk about what I believe, and I think all of you agree, is the most important profession when it comes to launching tomorrow's leaders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists. I think I'll introduce you one at a time, or is that right? I think, why don't we bring on the panel? Bring it on. Let's give a round of applause for our panel. And then I'll introduce you all. We're missing Torrey. Torrey wasn't. Okay, it's Torrey. Okay, great. All right, thank you guys. I'm going to introduce the panel briefly and then get to our conversation, because I know you all are interested in hearing what these fabulous people have to say. I'm going to start right here. Last but not least to arrive, Torrey Maldonado, everybody. He is a 6th grade teacher at a fabulous middle school in Ruthanne. He has also been recognized by the New York City's Chancellor as one of the city's top teachers, and he's a highly acclaimed author. He has been voted a top 10 Latino author and the best middle grade and young adult novelist for African Americans. Next to Torrey, we're thrilled to have Dr. Betty Rosa. She's the newly elected Chancellor of New York's Board of Regents. She's the former Senior Superintendent of Schools in the Bronx. She's a former principal, assistant principal, and teacher, and she also attended public elementary and junior high school schools here in New York City. Dr. Rosa, thank you so much for being here. We can say Ruthanne Buck's newest title is the Teaching Matters Champion of Education and Innovation Award recipient. And as you heard from her wonderful introduction, she's also Senior Advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Education, John King. And last but definitely not least, I can't even see you, Lynette Guastaferro, there she is, Executive Director of Teaching Matters. I think pretty much everyone in the room knows what Teaching Matters does, working with approximately 100 schools around the city, providing coaching to school and teacher leaders and teacher teams. I was lucky enough to watch some of that coaching firsthand earlier this year in the spring for a story, and it was amazing. So I salute the work of this that you do, Lynette, and I'm thrilled here to talk with you all. Okay, so let's get right to it. You heard the numbers, you all, that Olga was mentioning, some really concerning numbers, including that 30% drop in enrollments in teacher prep programs. Dr. Rosa, maybe I can start with you. What why are we seeing that decline in the number of teachers entering the profession? Why, and what can be done about it?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that I'm going to start from the perspective of both what I call the practical as a former principal, superintendent, and currently 9 years on the Board of Regents and watching the decline. I think that we are faced as a country with issues of people feeling that the blame of society in many situations really falls on. It seems that while we know that society is a reflection, schools are reflections of society. As Durkheim would say, you know, looking in the mirror, you can't blame the mirror for the reflection. So in many ways, I think that people have made teachers scapegoats in many of the issues that we're facing. I think the profession in terms of pay, the demands, the challenges, the expectations, and even as we go through the process of recruiting, retention, and professional development, supporting, we do not, I have to tell you, we don't do a good job in supporting the development and people really wanting to be a part of a team, be a part, in many ways it's very isolating. It's particularly in challenging neighborhoods, in places where people have to come in knowing culture and issues, competencies, how to build those relationships. So we have many, many challenges in looking at who goes into the profession, how do we retain people, and more importantly, how do we develop so that they become amazing individuals in the profession. I think in other professions, medical and other professions, we do an incredible job in creating that support system. I don't think that we've got this right yet. Thank you.
Yeah, Ruthanne, you're shaking your head there. I wonder if you could jump in, particularly on that point of what more we can do to support the profession. Dr. Rosa mentioned the comparison to the medical profession. What supports, what training to get the best and brightest and keep them in the profession as well?
Well, we've got to dramatically redefine opportunities for educators, specifically teachers. You've got individuals who have more formal education and certification than I have as a senior advisor and secretary of education, who are in classrooms not being given any opportunity to lead, not being given any opportunity to grow, who are participating in sit and get professional development that is not tailored to their needs. And you have the only path to advancement is to go into administration. That's crazy. That makes absolutely no sense. You want to keep your best and brightest teachers in the classroom teaching our children. And when the only opportunities you're offering for increased pay and responsibility are to go into the nonprofit world or an administrator role, then you are taking our best and brightest out of the classroom. So I think, look, we just released Title II guidance last week that I believe dramatically redefines for states what we should be looking at in terms of our Title II dollars. We should be reinvesting our Title II dollars, not just in professional development. That's important and that matters. But what matters more is taking those dollars and investing in them and redefining how teachers spend their day, giving them the time to use their expertise, paying them for using their expertise, investing in their ability to collaborate with one another, to build networks, and to grow these sort of learning communities of teachers where they feel like they have leadership roles and responsibilities, where their expertise is being used, and that they are able to make more money and have more responsibility while still teaching our kids every day. In the countries where teaching is an elevated profession and respected profession, teachers are not spending every single minute of their day in classrooms with kids. They are spending a portion of their day in classrooms with kids, and they're spending a portion of their day growing and learning, and they're spending a portion of their day collaborating with their peers and making decisions for how the school is run, and in some cases how the district and state or country is run. That matters.
Yeah, Lynette, I mean, you see this on a day-to-day level with you and your team and your colleagues, what you're doing in terms of the coaching you're providing, and how invaluable that really is. How do we get to scale, really, right? How do we get so that all teachers are getting that development that where they own their learning, they own their success?
So Ruthanne is hinting at something that's really important. There's like basic structural issues that prevent it, time, and roles where teachers are leading the work. So what my organization does is works with some of the hardest, some of the highest poverty schools in New York, upwards of 90%, which is higher than the average poverty in many areas. And what happens in those schools, because they're very difficult environments, is that they don't often, they have a challenge with retaining some of their bench of instructional leadership. So we're bringing teachers from that could teach anywhere, and bring them to those schools so they can develop teachers to not only teach math very well or early reading very well, but also work with them around. Has anybody's ever seen doctors like doing medical rounds? Everyone's seen it on TV. That's actually something we have to work with teachers to learn how to do with each other, to learn how to coach each other so they can learn together. So we're developing teachers both in the instruction, because there's a missing bench of leadership in the high-speed schools. But we have said you can have a teacher who has the potential in 2 years to move into a leadership role, 3 years, where they learn their content, but now they're leading other teachers in the work. And that's the work that we're doing in the high-speed schools in New York.
And Torrey, I want to bring you in because first of all, it's how do we get the teachers, right? The great, excellent teachers and diverse teachers. As many of us know, more women than men are teachers. I think the number is also fewer than 20% of public teachers are of color. I mean, I think we all know why diversity is important in our classrooms. So Torrey, $1 million question. How do we get more people, great teachers like you, to choose this profession and be in our classrooms?
Okay. First, you guys can hear me? I gotta use my teacher voice sometimes.
Exactly.
I recently was at a barbecue, and someone saw my brother, and how his brother left teaching, and his brother had all these traits that would make up a great teacher. And it boiled down to, you guys can't hear it? Okay, let me use that. When I'm going this, you guys hear it, right? So I'm just going to flip it to my left. I want to bring it up. So, he basically, this guy, he left the teaching profession, and he had all of these opportunities to stay. He had all these traits that would make him a teacher who would shine, and he left the teaching profession. And the reason why he left it is he said he felt like nothing he did mattered. He felt like his voice didn't matter. And I remember, I was just sharing this story at our table. Oprah, who no one knows, right? Well, Oprah said she noticed something, a thread, a theme running through all of the interviews when everybody took their mic off. President Obama did it. She said Bruce Springsteen did it. She named all these people who did it. They would basically ask the same question. Was I good enough? Did what I say matter? And one of the things that I have to say that's kept me at my school for over 16 years is I know that at any point of the day I can go into my principal's office, and if she's not available at that moment, she'll make time for me and I can share an idea, and within the month I'll see that idea taking shape in the school environment, and I know that I can help shape the school environment. And I think that's one of the things that would have kept the guy who quit in the teaching profession, and it's definitely something that keeps me inside the teaching profession. I wanted to add one more thing, if I can.
Of course.
We talk about diamonds, right? I was sitting next to somebody who was telling me about a diamond story, Roxanne. And diamonds are formed by pressure, right? And lots of hands touch the diamond, and it gets covered in dirt, but lots of hands shine it and polish it up, and eventually it shines, right? I definitely wouldn't be in my school for over 16 years if I didn't go through those toughening times and didn't have the support that I was given. I definitely was supported and polished in a way that allows me to reflect all of the great teaching and teachers who have helped polish me.
Amazing. That's a beautiful story. I mean, Dr. Rosa, everyone in this room, I know can talk about, I'm sure you too, many teachers who changed our lives, right? Changed the narrative of our lives. We know how important great teachers are. I asked you first why the problem is what it is. What, from your vantage point, what more can we do again to get those best and brightest and then keep them in the profession for years and years to come, and where they're feeling growth and challenge throughout their careers?
Well, as you talked about that, I guess I immediately sat here thinking about, somebody who came to this country without speaking a word of English. And yet, and I came in 1960 during the Nixon-Kennedy debate, from a warm island to a cold September. By that point, it was cold. And met probably one of the most encouraging, Tom Giordano, one of the most encouraging human beings in my life, that clearly did not allow the barrier of language acquisition to be a barrier, but rather celebrated it, encouraged it, and allowed me to use it as a support system and something to be proud of, which I've honestly held on to. So I think that you have people in this profession, and you've had all of us in this room can close your eyes and you'll think of those teachers that touched your life. But you can also think of some of those teachers that were tough love and those that should have never been in the profession. And so we have those, we can put those in buckets, and we can certainly talk about each of those. I think that in this profession, particularly because we have a lot of women in the profession, I do believe that somehow we don't value it the same way as if men. We seem to encourage a lot of men to go on to become principals. I was a high school principal where there were very few men. I was a superintendent at the same time, very few women. So, and even when I joined the Board of Regents, there were 3 women out of 17. Today, we have 10, I'm proud to say. So I think in many ways the profession is dominated by women, and sometimes the perception, the optics of why people go into the profession, sometimes really gives a story that's really an incomplete story. Many women go into it because of the fact that they have a passion, because they care, because they want to build relationships in a community with children and other staff people, and they really want to contribute. That story gets turned around in many ways and gets retold by media and by people sometimes who really don't even understand the work. Unfortunately, I think for a long time, at least for the last 10 to 12 years, we have not taken control of our narrative. We have allowed others to take control of our narrative. And so I think that this profession is a very, very important profession that has not, for whatever reason, because of the pay issue, because of who's in it, because of the fact that there are so many challenges to build those relationships, that we have been blamed, easy scapegoats, easy villains, right? And so I think that in this profession we really have to we have to take it back. And I'm one that I'm very much committed to taking back this profession and retelling and creating a new narrative about this wonderful profession. Because if we don't do that, I think we're doing recruiting, retention, professional development, but we're really not getting it out there and telling our stories. And so I think we have to begin by creating a new narrative. And secondly, I think we have to think about how to elevate the conversation and make sure that many of us take our rightful place at the table so we can celebrate all the wonderful things that are part of our educational system.
My you know, how do we do that? And I wonder, also, are there lessons from our international friends? I mean, teachers are respected and valued in China, South Korea, Finland, not at all in the same way here in the United States.
Well, I would say it's the same lesson about languages. We don't respect languages in this country. We respect languages in other countries. So I think we have a lot of work to do in respecting other cultures, respecting other languages, and respecting the professions. So I think that if we tie our relationship building to really, again, back to the narrative issue, and realizing that we do have to elevate this profession. And part of it, we have to do it through higher ed institutions. I mean, most of you have read and have been following I know at the state level, we are rethinking the whole profession from a higher ed perspective. What does it mean? So from a concrete perspective, I have 2 chairs in the higher ed. One is a former Kathy Cashin, former superintendent. She meets with the deans, and we are looking at the rigor of higher ed. We're looking at the whole emphasis on higher ed and really getting to the practice, using the research but the practice of becoming a teacher, not just the theory of becoming a teacher. Because most of you know, there's a big gap. You know, we have a gap between the theory and the classes and the content and the actual practice. So part of what we're trying to do is focus on what does practice look like? How do we become practitioners with research and looking at the work from our end, from the policy perspective. So we've got a lot of work to do in higher ed. We've got a lot of work to do in the P-12 world. And specifically, I really think we have a lot of work to do, even in terms of recruiting. How we recruit, how do we retain, and how do we support, as I said earlier. But all of this work takes all of us. It takes investments in partnerships. It takes investment in believing that some of the best and the brightest need to go into professions. It's too many times, even when I go to different social gatherings, everybody says, you know, I want my child to go into this profession, but he or she will never survive on $32,000, $35,000. And the only way is if we think about some of the specifics in terms of ways that we can elevate, that people can, in fact, be a part of this profession and make a decent living, and also be very proud that they are contributing to a very, very noble profession.
Anybody on the panel want to jump in on that? Go ahead, Torrey.
So there's this, when you speak about narrative, right? There's this narrative that runs through my life. When I first checked Vassar out, anybody with Vassar in the house? Vassar? Yeah. What's up, Vassar? High five. As an undergrad, when I got to Vassar and I was checking it out, just, you know, it immediately felt comfortable to me. And at one point, one of the guys says to me, do you realize that, like, we're in class right now, checking this class out, and, you know, about 12 ladies, and, like, it's just you and me. And I totally didn't notice it. I didn't notice it. I was like, wow, we really are, like, I remember about the ladies in here. And I think the reason I didn't notice it is because I grew up around women. You know, I grew up with a strong mom who valued education. She taught me that education is the bridge to all things possible. She taught me that education is my weapon. Even when I was young, I thought it was the corniest advice ever. And I didn't see how it was applicable. And then recently that narrative came up again because I want to give a shout out to my principal. She's sitting right there. That's Ms. Mitchell. And I hope the audience lets me go swiftly back to the point of can we learn something from our international allies, because we can also learn something from our local allies. I want to talk about Ms. Mitchell and the wonderful work that she does, and that should be replicated and studied. So recently she sent me to a citywide research action project, and I'm there, And I look around and I realize at the table, I'm the only guy at the table. And here's this narrative again, me being the only guy at this table. And I felt comfortable, and I didn't realize until like the end of the conference. I was like, oh, this is happening again, right? I don't know if we need to like go to schools where the females outnumber the males, and the guys feel comfortable and they're doing right on campus, and we need to recruit those guys into the teaching force. I don't know if that's a strategy, but I definitely do know that we should look at schools that have really amazing recruitment strategies and are succeeding in creating a diverse workforce. And that's why I want to move to my principal, because if you come to our school, I don't know how she does it, but she needs to write a book. She needs to write a book, or she needs to have a YouTube channel, or something needs to happen where she turnkeys how she recruits teachers, because she continually recruits the best and the brightest teachers. I'm not trying to brag about myself. But you recruit the best and the brightest teachers who come in, who have a passion for kids, who believe that kids should have their voice and that kids should have choices. Voice and choices are a thing that I learned. And I just really encourage, if anybody wants to check out a really good school where it's happening, you should check out MS88 in Barcelona, the school where I teach. And that's my principal.
And I just want to piggyback on that, because I have an opportunity to visit lots of schools, and I know Amy's school very well. And so in terms of a strategy, that's quite concrete, and beyond one principle, is that Aileen sets up many, many opportunities for teachers to lead in that building. So, and she gives teachers a lot of very constructive voice and practical impact on the school. And when she recruits, she talks that up. And so she finds people who want to come there because they're going to have this career directory. Our millennials have this much patience for standing in a dead-end job. And Aileen had figured that out. But we as a profession haven't quite wrapped our head around that, because they're walking because they don't want to be in what they perceive as a job which they now know is incredibly difficult. In my lifetime, that's changed. People now know teaching is hard, but there's no status to it, and it's considered a dead-end move. And so that has to change. And the great news is there's been a lot of time in this country focused on raising standards and accountability, but what we did not do is realize that the issue was not our teachers. It was the profession itself. It was the entire structure. And another good point, 100 years ago, the medical profession was in the exact same boat. And what happened? What did we get? We got residencies for doctors. We got a complete reformation to have doctors prepared. So we even have a model on how this is done. It's 100 years old that we can replicate. So it's very doable, and it is happening in our local spaces. But there are other countries that have figured this out faster than the U.S. that we could learn from.
Ruthanne, I wonder, more on that teacher leadership model, especially as Lynette's talking about the millennials. A millennial thinking about teaching, what could he or she envision in terms of their growth, in terms of their career trajectory, that would they get sort of the growth that they're looking for?
Sure. I mean, just a quick point on the teacher retention and recruitment issue. I have had the great pleasure of meeting with thousands and thousands of educators in my capacity. And one of them once said to me, I don't know if he took it from someone else or if it was his own, but he's like, if you solve the teacher recruitment problem, you solve the teacher recruitment problem, but if you solve the teacher retention problem, you solve the teacher recruitment problem and the teacher retention problem. And, as we're thinking about the supports and resources that need to be put in place for educators, and I believe especially as it relates to teacher diversity, we have to, there's not a one-size-fits-all model. What works in Eileen, what's your name? What works in Eileen's school may not work in Gadsden, New Mexico rural school, right? It may not be the best approach where PSRPs are coming in and making $14,000 a year and teachers are making $21,000 a year. And what they really need is to figure out a solution to their dire housing problem, right? And the $21,000 a year job in Gadsden, New Mexico is one of the highest paying jobs in Gadsden, New Mexico, right? I don't mean to pick on Gadsden, New Mexico. It's been 10 years since I've been at school organizing there, but the point is that there's not a one-size-fits-all model. And I think part of the problem, part of the mistake even we have made as a federal government, is trying to scale everything so rapidly that we see working in Eileen's school or in fill-in-the-blank school and fill-in-the-blank place. And saying, because it works here, it is going to work everywhere. And I think we have done, as a federal government, sort of a step back to look at what approaches can be, what nuanced approaches can be used that take lessons from those models that work and put in place, not necessarily from a sort of top-down policy perspective, but a bully pulpit, best practices, exemplars model, where we're opening the doors to our schools and classrooms and showing what is possible and allowing our local and state leaders to take those models and use them as possibilities rather than policies, right? So thinking about that is important. To the retention point, as it relates to diversity, you know, honestly, 18% of educators in this country are educators of color. Fewer than 2% are male educators of color. You know, we put a tax, and John wrote a piece of this on this a couple of months ago. We put a tax on our educators of color and a set of expectations on our educators of color that we don't put on our educators who are not of color. We just do. We have expectations around discipline. We have culture and climate issues. We've got to start thinking about how we create school environments that are interesting to educators of color and welcoming to, that can sustain their interest in being in schools. If you come from a high poverty or low income family, you're not thinking about teaching as a profession, especially in a high needs school, A, because the pay is so low, and B, because you've got your college education, probably your master's degree, and you've gone through several layers of certification. You are thinking about what you can do with that education, and teaching is not attractive. It's not attractive. What the president put on the table with their last budget proposal, a $1 billion proposal to invest in our highest poverty schools in this country, called Best Job in the World. And what it would have done is invested never before seen resources in our highest poverty schools to attract and retain great teachers, so that you don't consider it a promotion to move to the white suburban school. That you are going out for champagne with your spouse or partner and celebrating when you are selected to come to the highest poverty schools. There are countries who have this model in place and it works. Like, if you are truly investing in your hardest places, in your highest poverty places, and that oftentimes means your highest populations of kids of color and your most rural populations. If you're truly making those investments, you're going to attract great teachers. But the supports is the next piece. And that's why Teaching Matters work matters so much. Because what we are faced with right now is a lot of educators, no teacher, any teacher in this room tells me their first year was their best year of teaching, where they were most successful. I've never heard it said, right? We have to provide the supports and resources, the framework, the exemplars, the best practices. We have to make that available to our individual teachers, and Teaching Matters does that, and that matters. And so, to the extent that we are able to sort of replicate this work in other places, I hope we are able to do it. I've seen it in some places, not all, but I think that sums up.
That is a
my
lot.
here.
And then I wanted to just get a quick final word from Torrey and Lynette.
One of the things that also, I think that in many ways, we have engaged in these policies that are both at the federal level and at the state level. So I'm going to take responsibility on both sides that are really detrimental, meaning when we attached teacher evaluation, the whole teacher evaluation piece, the student piece to the teacher evaluation. In many ways, our schools that are very challenging and quote-unquote failing, the teachers internalized that failure so that they were going into some of these very challenging places and working 3 times as hard And yet, at the end of the day, they were walking away feeling that they were not making a difference. Some teachers would go into high-performing schools, and they celebrated because their students were high-performing, and they were high-performing, and the communities were high-performing. So it's really become the gap, I call it, the gap of expectations, the gap of results. And so this issue that we keep thinking that the solutions lie in the federal government or in the state government, I truly believe that many of these particular pathways lie at the local level because there are differences. And I think each time that we think of whether it's the standards movement, the reform movement, now I call it the transitional movement, transformational movement, we have embarked in this very narrow way of defining success. And because we have defined it from an I gotcha, accountability, we have really frustrated many individuals who want to make a difference, who want to be in these situations, but they can't be in these situations when the minute that they engage and go into these situations, you begin to blame them. You blame the victims, you blame the communities, you blame, and you play the blame game. And this issue is really an issue that keeps people away, because you say, you know what, if at the end of the day I'm going to have children that are 3 or 4 years below their level, and I'm going to work 3 times as hard to get them at a higher level, and yet the test doesn't measure that level because it's a grade level test. And then you blame the victim, and this is a federal policy and a state policy. Then you blame the victim, and you blame the schools, and you blame the communities. And you don't blame the real issue, which is society and poverty. So we don't have the solutions until we have the honest conversations. We keep having what I call the narrow conversations. And as long as we stay in the narrow conversations, we're safe. And we tinker around the edges and we find some small solutions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a big problem that deserves a big solution, not a small solution. So in my work, I really want to have the honest conversations around what constitute good programs, good retention, good recruitment, good training for teachers, but more importantly, teachers that are prepared to go in and do this work in a way that honors their communities, their students, and their own self-worth. Other than that, we are really creating failure after failure.
And I know we have, that's wonderful. I know we have to wrap up very quickly, Torrey and Lynette, very quickly, because I know it's the end. This audience, any advice? These are passionate people in this room. What can they do to help change the narrative?
There's a guy named Adam Clayton Powell, and Adam Clayton Powell, I see some people nodding. He hung out around this area, but a while ago. He's no longer alive. He was a great civil rights leader, and he said that if you want to put out fires, you got to deal with people who have the water. And I think that there's a lot to be learned by studying schools around the country, around the world, where the retention is amazing. And there's a lot to be learned by studying teachers and interviewing teachers who have a passion for teaching and have stayed with it for a decade or more. We'll learn a lot. I want to talk about my connection to this and why I stayed in it. So, I love my mother, and I'm very proud of my mother, and I'm about to say something that my mother will be mortified by. So I just got to say that because I know this is being recorded, and if my mom sees it, I love you, Mommy. I'm not trying to shame the family or anything. We grew up in Red Hook Projects, which is in Brooklyn, New York, and when I grew up in Red Hook Projects, I remember that these like fancy people came into the neighborhood with these fancy cameras, and they were taking pictures, and they asked me, can I take a picture of you and your friends? And I had my mom's, I heard her voice. You know when you hear your parent, they're talking to you, saying, don't do it, don't do it. I can hear my mom saying, don't do it, don't let them take pictures of you. So I didn't let them take pictures, and I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, this guy had a camera and he was taking pictures of us and he was gonna give me $50. And you know how many Swedish fish I could buy? They used to sell the Swedish fish for a penny. So $50 and you do the math, right? So I didn't take the money. And she said, I'm glad you didn't take the money. So okay, fast forward. This is 1987. I'll never forget, I came home from school and right there on the living room table was a Life magazine. And Mike Tyson was on the cover with his then wife, Robin Gibbons. And every boy on my left and every boy on my right at that time loved Mike Tyson, right? So I was like, oh my God, there's my mother here. Because she screened anything I read. And she wasn't there. So I was like, oh, it's about to go down. So I opened up the magazine and I started flipping through it and they had Rocky Balboa in there, right? Rocky, so that's cool. I'm like, yes, Rocky, I love Rocky. I could be both of them. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger was in it and he was big at the time. But then I get to a part of the magazine where I start to realize my neighborhood is in the magazine. They did a 9-page photo spread on rental projects, and they called it the crack capital of the United States of America. And they called it one of the 10 worst neighborhoods in the country to live in. I mean, you can Google it, you can see it. And I almost was in that because I almost took the $50 and take a picture of me, right? And I looked through this, and I realized that 90% of the people that they photographed, either I knew them, either they knew me, or we really, really knew each other. And they dehumanized my community. And I remember having this feeling of, I wish I could have gone into Life magazine and found those people who took those pictures of my neighborhood, and did some Mike Tyson, Rocky Balboa action on them, right? But I remember seeing it and then waiting for my mom to come home, and my mom came home and I said, Mom, look at this. And she saw it and she said, so what do you think about it? And I was like, I'm so mad. And she said, well, you could be a part of the problem or you could be part of the solution, right? If you can't beat them, join them.
Right.
And I remember it was her saying that to me, and then other people along the way, teachers and educators who would say to me, are you going to be a part of the change that you want to see? I got to college, and I became the first person in my family to go to college. So I go to college, right? And I become, this person that you had described. I get my teacher certification. I come out of college. I'm being offered jobs on Wall Street. I'm being offered jobs here. People are telling me, you gotta get that money. Get that money. Go, don't go to teaching. And I decided to go into education. One of the reasons why I went into education is I'll never forget, someone sat me down and they said, these kids, they need someone like you. There's a reflection of them. And because when they look at you and they say, all right, you're trying to get me career ready, and I see you, a reflection of me. You readied yourself for your career, and you're shining in your career. I can do it. And they see me saying, you can be college ready. And they know they can do it because they see a reflection of them. They say, you got ready for college and you excelled and shined in college. So I just think that I want to take a note out of Humans of New York. You guys know Humans of New York?
Yes.
Right? How many people like reading those excerpts from Humans of New York? I think we need to do like a Teachers of New York.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a great idea.
Or Teachers of the U.S. Where, and it resonates with people, I see people nodding, where we get teachers like myself, and like others who have been in the career for a long time, who are shining, who are thriving, who, I wrote a national best-selling book about 2 middle school students, and I'll never forget, I don't brag about my book in school, I don't talk about it with my students, and I'll never forget, I was on NBC with Chuck Scarborough, and the next day I come to school, and one of my students pulls me aside at the end of class and says, Mister, I saw you on TV yesterday. And I said, you did? And he said, yeah, you were on NBC with that guy. And I said, yes, I was on NBC. And he said, you never told me that you wrote a book. And I said, no, I didn't. And he said, what are you doing here? Why are you teaching? You could be doing what J.K. Rowling does. You could be, and I told him, what was told to me. That's exactly why I'm here. I'm a reflection of you. What better way to show you can do it than doing it and being here and helping you along to your goal. So I think teachers of New York, who's going to help me with that? Anybody do that?
Seems like a great story. Very quickly, Lynette, and then I think we have to wrap this up.
I don't think I can add to that. I am going to say though, I would love for people to come and visit the schools and not to take pictures, but to actually get beyond the stories that you hear and get to know the people and the communities and see the teachers and see what they're doing. Because anytime I've ever taken anybody from Lynette to go see the work that's done and who are in the schools, it really is transformational in terms of people's perception. So please come with me. I think we have a visit on November 5th, October 25th, maybe November 5th, and just that's my ask. Just come. First, know so that you can advocate for, but first meet and form the relationships. That's great.
How about a round of applause for this?
So I wanted to thank the panelists and Kelly for the solid conversation on what our teachers need so they can deliver this monumental task of education on our nation. I was going to summarize this. I'm not. I'm also not going to tell you all the things about teaching management. You've heard that, and I thank Ruthanne particularly for being so complimentary to our work, which I believe is self-explanatory, but it's always nice to see that I see it too. But I will want to try on a higher note to take this up. This extremely emotional moment of yours was really wonderful for people to see just how real it touches the fundamentals of our country. But there's a larger picture too that we have to consider, and I think we made a fair share of explaining this to you. But getting the teacher profession right is not an obligation we have to our students or our teachers alone. It is essential to the growth of the American economy. And with innovation and technology and automation threatening many of the traditional middle-class jobs, the nature of employment as a whole will fundamentally change, and the social and economic progress will have to feed each other. So it is my conviction that countries that do not pair incentives with innovation for the retooling of their education sector will fall behind. So the urgency goes beyond our bottom-up approach, which is the way we implement it, but it is directly related to how we're going to play in the future. We cannot wish for the prosperity of yesterday. We're starting with ourselves and are leading through the examples of our teachers. Bottom-up, transparent leadership will be the key indicator for a flexible growing economy. When you look at the predictions for the largest growth sectors of the employment in the next 10 years, you're looking at healthcare, tech, big data, but also at nursing and at teaching. These are the top 20 growth sectors that we're going to be looking at. When a lot of these options will disappear, lifelong learning will become the norm. And guess what? Just like lifelong learning, just like early learning, it will happen with a teacher by your side. And the teacher of tomorrow, if he's not ready to give our students the tools to grasp, to learn, to judge, or to inquire, none, and I repeat, none of these opportunities in the employment sector will be for our children. In other words, if we don't get the role and the career of the teacher right, we can kiss those opportunities goodbye. Excellent teaching can give the US an edge in the world, and we need to convince the millennial generation, of which we have a few wonderful examples here, to see this as an opportunity to distinguish themselves. When considering the US education system, we're looking at, number one, the largest education system in the Western world. We're looking at a struggling middle class. We're looking at a growing large number of poor students. And we're looking at a very unevenly distributed technological revolution. And still, with Teaching Matters, teachers, Ruthanne, Betty Rosa, everyone making their small role in this, we have a dynamic system that make our teachers better. And I think, if you compare it to anywhere else in the world, that is incredible. And I would like to take the opportunity to appeal to you to become part of our quest and to contribute in the form that you can. Even this wonderful institution, the Union Club, has recognized its potential and has allowed us to use our cell phones. In case you would like to make your pledge on your cell phones right now. So you have a little card on your table, and the number is 91999, not 666. And you type in teaching plus the dollar amount you wish to pledge, and you'll receive an instant acknowledgement of your tremendous generosity and vision. once you've used that phone and been generous, then you're not allowed to use the phone anymore. So you can't check your emails or you're about to go out. And you must put that thing away. But thank you for considering being so generous. But equally important is what Lynette said, is come and see our school visits. Before you've seen it, you will understand in the flesh what that means. And I think I don't want to drag on about it anymore. You know that it's good. But I have one small anecdote which I want to bring to you, which is a lady called Susan P., a former special education teacher whom we did not know. She basically gave us the proceeds from her apartment after she passed and bequeathed us $500,000. I have to believe that we're doing something right when teachers show this type of generosity. But this brings me to the last and the personally hardest part of my message today, which I say with tremendous personal and professional dedication. And that is that the founder of Teaching Matters, Elizabeth Ruthanne, to whom we owe the foundation of our mission, is not well. Even in her frailness, she's given me lessons by which I carry on to support Teaching Matters. With her loss of speech and her diminished communication ability, I can see how much is left in her after so much has been taken away from her. And I got very, very angry at Mark Twain's famous word that we should not try and live forever because we will not succeed. But I know that in my mind she will live on always, and but far more importantly, through this institution she will. And what started as a social vision to narrow the achievement gap has become a full-grown institution, still ready to grow more, and of course poised to address systemic solutions in the industry. And I know that Elizabeth Ruthanne is proud of us. I know that she sighs in relief that her initial instinct to generosity has led to this bold organization, which is now independent and at the forefront of impact on teacher quality. I also know that as she lies today, contemplating her rich life, she knows that what happens daily in our work will make her ideas eternal. So take that, Mark Twain. I never do this, but in the conspicuous absence of Liz Ruthanne, I would like to ask the people who make Teaching Matters what it is to stand, and who will continue to forge our legacy for the future. So I'd like Teaching Matters board to stand, please. Come on, guys.